Hello, everyone. Greetings. Welcome to the Grace People Talk, GPT. And this is going to be the third episode in the book of Ruth. And we spoke about Naomi and we spoke about Ruth. And today we are going to be talking about Boaz. And let me set the stage first. In Ruth chapter 2, verse 11, and Boaz makes a statement about Ruth. And he says that come into a foreign country in the place where she is not going to be welcomed. And what a courageous decision that Ruth has made. In a sense, if you want to compare this decision with Abraham also left the father and the mother, and he came, but there was a family and children that was promised to him, and he had blessings with him, and he had a promise of land with him. But when you consider Ruth, she did not have that, and she took a tremendous risk. And that is the journey of faith in a nutshell, to talk about Ruth. And then you see Naomi changed in her perspective in chapter 3, verse 1, and she is thinking, good for Ruth. And chapter 3 is a beautiful chapter, and chapter 2 ends with the harvest ending in. So the harvest is going to end, and there is no more gleaning anywhere in Bethlehem, because they are going to be done with the harvest. And what are you going to do next? And how are you going to survive? And that is the place where Naomi is thinking, good for Ruth. Okay, so we cannot be going on, and the temporary solution is over. Now we have to do something. And she is also taking a great risk of suggesting Ruth to go to Boaz's threshing floor in the night. Right. And so just think about that decision. It's a risky decision. And but she is trusting that Boaz would not take advantage. And because she learns about Boaz in chapter 2 as a man of integrity. And there are many women that have taken such a risk, but it is in a negative stage or negative style. In Genesis 19, you see Lot's daughter. Uh, they wanted to have a heritage, and the way they did it, it is like, no, not good, and they slept with their own father. And on the other hand, there is another woman who took a risky decision, and that is in Genesis chapter 38. Uh, Tamar, and she wanted to have a heritage, and she slept with her own father-in-law. But this decision is not one of that kind. There is risk involved in this decision, but it was an amazing, godly decision, and it was a decision of redemption, and it was a decision where they were allowing God to move in their lives. And what I wanted to say in a nutshell in the introduction is you see the footprints of the women in the world of men. Right, how God allowed these two women to play a role in the providential plan of God. And in fact, one of the two books that are named after women is the book of Ruth. But today in this episode, we are not going to be talking about Ruth and Naomi, though they come in our conversation. So main conversation is going to be on Boaz.
Okay. To begin with the life of Boaz, I would want to ask a question to you. Like, is work given more weightage than the worker himself? Now, what do I mean by that? So let's take an example. When the Tower of Babel was built, um, the most importance was given to the brick that was taken to the height, than if at all a person fell off, that was not a important thing, but the brick being taken up was given much weightage. Or let's take an example, say in our home, if our daughters want to pitch in for help, and then yes, they do little mess, but sometimes their errors are more magnified than the help that they give to offer. So many a times we see that the work is given predominance over the worker himself or herself. But when we see Boaz is not like that. He's not such a kind of master. And you also see his attitude towards wealth and also workers. It was very different from, say, the masters that are in the world. Now, can you speak more on that aspect of Boaz?
Okay. So before I answer that question, let me introduce the people that are here, part of the GPT, and I am Pastor Guru, and this is my wife, Nalini. Now let's get into what kind of a man Boaz is. And I want you to read this book. Chapter 2 is Boaz in the daytime, and the chapter 3 is Boaz in the nighttime. Right? You don't see the difference between the daytime Boaz and the nighttime Boaz, man of integrity. And as you mentioned about the work is not given priority compared to the worker in the mind of Boaz. And I want to show you how he did that. In chapter 2, verse 4, he comes into the field and he greets all the reapers.
Okay.
And they also invoke a blessing upon Boaz's life. And after that, he spots Ruth there, and he is asking a question: who is this lady? And the moment the supervisor tells Boaz that this is so and so, and he has already heard about Ruth, and the first thing is he is concerned about the safety of that foreigner. That is chapter 2, verse 8. And he sees possible abuse upon Ruth, and he sees physical molestation and possibility of it in Ruth chapter 2, verse 9. And he says that, no, so do not go to any other field being a foreigner. I want you to cling to the women in chapter 2, verse 8. And he orders men not to touch her. That is an amazing thing. And as a leader, as a manager, and as a man of God, and he sees that that woman, foreign woman, could be in trouble, and he immediately comes for the aid of her in terms of the security. And after that, he invites her to drink. In chapter 2, verse 9, it is not a separate drink, it is not a separate bottle, but he is saying that why don't you come and drink from the drink, from the water that I kept for all the other servants. That is amazing. That is inclusion of a foreigner into the commonwealth of Israel, which is not conventional then. In fact, we have to talk about the woman at the well and do an episode on that. You remember that? So, at the moment Jesus is asking for a drink, and she's saying, how you being a Jew and you are asking a drink from a Samaritan? But that thought was not even there in the mind of Boaz, and he says, come on, drink. And I want you to drink from the same drink where all the others are drinking. And after that, in chapter 2, verse 14, it is not just drink, and he is calling her to uh, to eat with them. That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. You read in the Gospels how the Pharisees were so meticulous about washing their feet and thinking about the Gentiles and all these things you see. But um, on the other hand, Boaz is like asking her to come and have a meal with him. And from all these things, what I could see is he is the manager who could actually not only be kind to his workers, but was able to see a foreigner. And in fact, the inclusion of a foreigner into the commonwealth of Israel, that makes me to think that Boaz is nothing but a type of Christ. And we as Gentiles, and Christ included us into his salvation plan. And you could be a manager, or you could be a teacher, or you could be an employee, or a husband, or a wife. Think about Boaz's thoughts and attitude, how he had the attitude that he had with the workers, and the kindness that he had with the workers. And anyone could approach Boaz. He was like a lamb, and he was not like a roaring lion as a manager and yelling and screaming, but he was like a uh, man who is like a lamb and type of Christ. And we can be like that and minister the life of God in the place where we are.
Wow. No, it's great to see that Boaz is a manager of a sort where he made his workers more acceptable around him. In fact, Ruth herself says in 2 verse 13 that you have spoken kindly to your maidservant. So that really reflects on like how you shared a great manager whom we have to follow wherever we are, and whichever role we take. Okay, now the next question is a more interesting one, because I was thinking after the fall, one of the greatest emotion of man that controls him many a times is insecurity. Say for example, say I would bring in a practical example. Say I myself and my friend are in a job, and then like there is a promotion that's awaiting, and it's going to be to one of us. And let's say my friend has a better option of like getting it than me, and then but the information of promotion comes to me first. That means if I could act so subtly, I can keep the information out from my friend and try getting the promotion because I feel that I deserve it, or like or if you take an example, say even in the case of say even getting a job, if two people are applying for a job, and then if the other person has a better edge than me, there is always an insecurity that I want to like capture that place of blessing, bypassing this person. But when we see Boaz is not a person like that. He didn't want to trick. There was an integrity, like how you mentioned, Boaz displayed. Even here, he displays integrity of like, he knew that there is a kinsman who is much closer to Naomi's relative, but then he is the second in charge. But then he doesn't want to bypass this person, knowing the fact that, maybe say if he considers getting Ruth, but then there could have been a possibility he could have kept Ruth out and then still, sorry, the kinsman out, and he could have gone for Ruth. But can you explain, what is that kind of integrity that Boaz possessed, even in this case, where he could overcome this insecurity?
Yeah, so Naomi did not foresee about that particular kinsman whose name is not mentioned in the Bible, but Boaz sees that.
Yes.
He says that there is one that is closer than me, who could actually function in the principles of redemption before me. And if he is not going to take up the opportunity and let me take it up, and that shows his security and also the trust that he had in the plan of God for his
Wow.
life, in terms of God adding a wife to him. And sometimes it could happen, right? So let's say that I have a opportunity to do something, and what if God says no to it? And one such thing that I could think of is David wanted to build the temple, and the prophet came. Nathan comes and says that, okay, do it, whatever is in your heart. And then the next day, God comes and corrects Nathan, saying that to go and tell David that he is the man of war, and his gift is in terms of waging a war. And his gift is not in terms of building buildings, but I want him to establish peace and let his son Solomon build the temple. How are you going to take it? Right. So initially you wanted to do something, and then God says no to it. And it could happen in the church. Let's say that I want to be operating in this particular location or in this gift, and somebody comes and says that no, that is not the place where you could function, and why don't you function in another place? And David took it very well. And you know what he did? He started gathering the materials for the temple, and he made everything available for Solomon. And he even made the blueprint for the temple, and he introduced all that that he has done, and he has he had handed over to Solomon. Would you ever do that? No? So if I am not given an opportunity to do something, I will make sure that the other person is not going to do it. But that was not the thought of David. And yeah,
Yes.
I'm not given an opportunity to do it, and I want you to excel in that particular field. And that tells that no, that is the heart of God, and that is the display of the beautiful side of God through the life of Boaz, where he allowed God to be God, and at the same time, if it comes to me, let it come, and if it is for others, and let them take it.
Wow. As you say this, I'm reminded of one thing that happened in our life. I remember the time when my mom said that you need to wait for a year, where I would be looking for a bridegroom and you would not be there. And you said if she is for me, I would choose to wait on God. And I remember I also didn't connive myself. I said, God, if you have want us to come together, let's look to it. I think the integrity of waiting on before God, like how you mentioned, Boaz did. I think after 1 year, my mom eventually called you back and said, I think you're the one who is made for her, and her plans of wanting another thing didn't work out. But to see the integrity in which we can function before God with no slyness or any subtlety, we see that God can come through if it
Yes,
is in His
yes.
plan.
I remember that those conversations in Chennai. Waiting is one of the difficult thing for people. And look at how chapter 3 ends. Naomi says one word to Ruth: wait.
Yes.
Would you wait for such and such things to happen, or are you going to scheme behind the scene?
Yes.
And what is Boaz thinking? Boaz is saying, wait.
Yes.
And sometimes this four-letter word is a very, very difficult word for people. And but I love God. I'm sure God will come through.
Yes. Okay. My the third and the last part of today's thought is a question also is let's say if I receive wealth or blessing from someone, I'm so glad. I'm saying, okay, I would gladly receive that. But if it is along with that blessing comes, the person through whom the blessing is coming also has to be added. So let's take for an instance, uh, say a person is there and he is waiting to receive an inheritance from his dad. Then he's excited to receive the inheritance, but then the very thought of taking care of the dad after that, is like a little weightage, because there is much maybe patience and long suffering things that has to go behind. But human mentality, at least for the most of people, would be like, I wouldn't mind the blessing, but the person through whom it's the blessing comes, if they have to be with me, then I have to have a second thought. Or let's take another example. I was thinking like many a times, many people say we want to learn a skill. Then I go to a place and I learn the skill. And then then I realized that I could excel much better than the master himself. Let's say an example. And then I would think that, what, hey, I have come to a place where, what, I have received the skill now. And, I don't need the master through whom the skill came anymore. That kind of attitude of rejecting the person through whom the blessing came. I think that kind of attitude was surely displayed by Ruth's other kinsmen, Naomi's kinsmen, because it says in 4 verse 5, when Boaz is saying, you not only get the inheritance of Naomi, but you have to also inherit Ruth and Naomi. But then he is like, wait a minute, I don't mind the inheritance, but when it comes to the aspect of inheriting Ruth, what the liability, according to me, then I wouldn't want it. So can you explain, how this mentality is there in all of us? How can we overcome this kind of mentality?
Yeah, so just to think about, okay, this that kinsman's name is not even mentioned. It says Paloni Amoni in Hebrew language, which means like so and so. God did not give him a chance. I mean, to have his name recorded, and who only was thinking about financial gain. And the moment the inclusion of a foreigner, no, I'm not going to do it, and let me wash my hands right away, like no. So how Pilate did. And this is one side, and I also want to think about the other one. In chapter 2, verse 12, Boaz is praying a prayer. And what is the prayer that he is praying for Ruth? And he is praying, saying that, so you have come to take refuge under the wings of God. And then he says that may the Lord be a blessing to you, and so on. So, and let's say that I pray for one particular person and say that, okay, so God, I'm praying that God would actually give you what you need. Maybe it could be a finance or whatever it is, no, so that you are thinking about. And then you see Ruth in Ruth chapter 3, verse 9, and why don't you be that wings? She is asking, spread your wings and cover me. Uh, okay, I can only pray, but I cannot be the answer to the prayer. And just think about it, no? So you want me to pray for you? Yes, I pray that God would give you something. And if I could give, wait a minute. So let me offer only the prayer, but not anything from my hand, because it is. It involves sacrifice. And when Ruth proposes in the middle of the night, would you please spread your wing? And the word wings in the Bible is an amazing wings, many amazing word. It is many times used in the Psalms by the psalmist. And in fact, Jesus Christ used that word in Luke chapter 13. And he said, if I could actually, like a hen gathers the chicken, and I would have actually gathered you under my wings. The word wings is speaking bird like protection of God. And he is praying that prayer, and then he realized that, oh my God, I'm going to be the answer for my prayer. And I pray that, so the funds should be given to the church, but what about me giving the funds? That is another one, right? So uh, this is was not the case with Boaz. In Matthew chapter 16, Peter says that, okay, you are the Son of God. And when Jesus Christ mentions the cross, and he says, no, no. And what did Jesus say? Jesus said, so you don't think like God, you think like man. And you want Christ, but not the cross. And that is the thoughts of man, right? A man thinks like that. But whereas God, Jesus Christ, and he left heaven and he came down to this earth, and it was not a smooth path for him in Philippians chapter 2, and he had to go up to the cross, and he was willing to offer himself even to a death on the cross. And that's what you see in the case of Boaz. And that is God's heart, absolutely. And we will close our episode on the book of Ruth here. In closing, if you come to the end of the book, you have the pedigree of Jesus Christ. In that pedigree, there are several things that are there. The one is the covenantal faithfulness. Just think about it. Everybody was doing right, what was right in their own eyes. And on the other hand, a Moabite woman was wanting to be faithful, and it was a covenant faithfulness. And you see the footprint of God in the genealogy, and you see the footprint of women in the world of man. And you see tremendous risk. Naomi taking risk, and you see Ruth taking risk. And you also see the bird like protection of God in this book, which is basically the providence of God. And you see the foreign blood in the blood of David. And that tells me that you and I are included in the plan of God. And so this is GPT, Grace People's Talk, and I want you to pray for these episodes and many more to come. Thank you so much for your support. God bless you.